18 months ago, TerraVerde began working with Visit Cornwall on its sustainable tourism strategy. And along the way, I was fortunate enough to be introduced to home rental business Cornish Gems and their exceptional ESG lead, Emma Fashokun. Now, we know that over-tourism has become a significant issue in many tourist destinations, draining local housing and making rents unaffordable. The problem is evident in places such as Barcelona and Mallorca, but Cornwall is affected by it too. The UK's leading domestic tourism destination, Cornwall gets 6 million visitors a year. But housing prices are amongst the highest in the country and salaries are among the lowest. And that leads to real negative sentiment towards tourism. So Cornish Gems are out to change this. And they are the founder of an initiative called the Better Business Community Initiative. And it's a consortium of local holiday home companies, and they're all taking action. So we're really fortunate enough today to have Emma with us. And just to give an idea of the background and tell us a little bit more about this fantastic initiative, Emma, that you are running.
Oh, hi, Patrick. Thanks for having me. I'm Emma Fashokun. As you said, I am the ESG strategy lead for Cornish Gems. So I led on our B Corp application last year, which we were lucky to be accredited with in January, or very proud, I should say, instead of lucky. About 18 months to 2 years ago, I had a conversation with the University of Exeter. I'm in that unusual position of coming from an old St. Ives family and working in the holiday home industry, and hopefully able to see both sides of the arguments that you outlined. And so I put together a brief and asked the University of Exeter to investigate further and provide us with a report on some of the negative impacts that our industry has on the communities of Cornwall. And that included things like holiday homes create ghost towns, or they only provide low-paying, insecure jobs. They create issues with housing, like you alluded to. So from that report, we were able, as a company, to put in place several policies that we hope will minimise those negative impacts, but also talk about some of the really positive elements of our industry and what we bring to Cornwall. Growing up in St. Ives as a kid, and unless you were a teacher or a policeman or something like that, you didn't have a year-round job. All the people my age left St. Ives because there weren't year-round jobs or careers. A lot of them are back now and running businesses in the hospitality industry, but it's not as simple as often is shown on newspapers or social media. Holiday homes are, for example, 39% of the second homes in Cornwall. 61% are second homes. Now, it could be argued that a holiday home from a company like ourselves that's responsible, where we're investing our money in the local community, we're real living wage employers, we utilise local suppliers and producers, and we do have year-round jobs for many people. All of that brings prosperity to the areas that we work in. And a second home where somebody is resident on odd weeks 3 or 4 times a year possibly doesn't bring that same level of value to the community. And, you know, when you think as well about all the indirect benefits to the community. So, you know, again, when I was a kid, restaurants weren't open year round, shops weren't open year round, and now largely they are.
How has mass tourism really affected the availability and affordability of housing in Cornwall? And then I suppose as a secondary, you know, so what were the key measures that you took to then, you know, to mitigate against this?
Sure. So Mass tourism is one issue. Mass tourism within the holiday home industry is another issue. So mass tourism in itself, when they're concentrated in those hotspots, obviously there's a really detrimental environmental effect, increased emissions, all of those kind of elements which we are a part of. One of the things that I often say about the holiday home industry that I really think needs to be understood by the holiday home industry is that our industry cannot grow exponentially. We cannot have so many holiday homes in Cornwall that people can't live here. And that's where we're at. Let's be realistic. Cornish Gems has put in place measures like we have caps in place in the St Ives area and the Padstow area. So we will not now nor ever take more than, I think it's 48 properties in St Ives area, 28 it's 55, sorry, in the St Ives area, 28 in the Padstow area. We have long committed to diversifying our portfolio across the county. So we don't just look at St Ives and Padstow and Newquay. And part of the idea beyond that is that there is a lot more to Cornwall than just those places. But also we can then offer jobs in the more affordable areas where people can afford to live. And so we're spreading the wealth, if you like. That one of the big ones, and to be clear, this is a line in the sand statement. We will not take any residential property below a market value of 400,000 onto our portfolio. So we are publicly stating and demonstrating that we absolutely will not impact on that affordable end of the market. And I understand that obviously we are luxury holiday homes. We were unlikely to be taking properties below that value anyway. However, for me as a local, it's important that boundaries are drawn. These are set in stone for us. And I think that understanding that, a 2-bedroom terraced house in the middle of Redruth is absolutely not a holiday home. And again, we're into grey areas. What defines a holiday home? It's very difficult. It's not easy.
So there's some fascinating points there, Emma. Firstly, just hearing tourism and the local community have to be able to exist symbiotically, have to be able to exist together to the benefit of both. And when tourism begins to outweigh the local community and there's nobody actually there to serve the tourists or to show them the local life in the destination they're visiting, the destination becomes irreparably damaged.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really, really important that this is understood. There is such a huge affordability gap, and this came out of our study with the University of Exeter. It's probably got worse since we did that report. But the huge affordability gap for local residents means they literally cannot afford to live in the town that they grew up in. I mean, my great granddad was the harbour master in St Ives. I couldn't afford to buy in St Ives. And it's really important that that's understood. And I mean, and again, the flip side of that, the counter argument to that is the reason there are so many holiday homes in the old part of St Ives, so Back Road West, Back Road East, is because people moved out of there. People like my granddad and my grandmother, they moved out of there because it wasn't suitable for modern living. They wanted a driveway, somewhere to park their cars, a garden for the kids to play in and grow vegetables. And for them, that living in that area was no longer viable for the lifestyle they wanted. And despite a lot of negative publicity about, this whole street is holiday homes, there is an argument that there's a reason they became holiday homes. And part of that is because they're not suitable for modern living. It's it's very difficult because we don't want to lose our culture and our community in St Ives. But also, we need year-round jobs. And whether you're an electrician, whether you work in a grocery shop, whether you are a teacher or work in a pharmacy, you don't have to directly be working for a holiday company or in hospitality to benefit from the prosperity that that brings to Cornwall. But, and the big but, is we have to do it regeneratively. We have to be able to put more back into the communities and less damage to the environment than we take out. And it's really, really important that, you know, we understand how we can do that and we implement that as an industry in a county that depends on us doing that, actually. Because if we don't look after Cornwall, it no longer becomes a place that people will desire to visit. And as you said, if people can't afford to live here, who's going to clean the holiday homes?
And look, that's fascinating, Emma, and it's a great point. And as you say, often it's the hotspots that get all the news.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of places in Cornwall where that tourism is not overdeveloped at the moment. There's more scope to be able to spread that tourism, and that will actually really benefit those local communities as an alternative to St Ives or Padstow or one of those places where it's super hot right now.
Mm.
I mean, super hot in terms of too many people. Maybe not super hot in terms of the sunshine at the moment.
We're hoping for some more sunshine. Yeah, and it's right, and it's, you know, it's always a balance. It's, you know, tourism in any place that is desirable to visit. It's always a balance, and you know, you've seen, you know, protests in Spain because they're having similar issues to us. They can't afford to live there. But we know that if British people stopped going there, they still couldn't afford to live there because they wouldn't have incomes. So it's understanding that there's a balance. And as, you know, as companies, as SMEs, as employers, we are responsible in trying to make sure that that balance is kept. And I don't, you know, I absolutely, hands up, don't have the solution, nor do Cornish Gems. All I can say is that we try to understand those problems and those issues. We try to improve and to do better for the communities, for the environment, for, you know, people who work for us, people we work with, like suppliers. You know, it's really just, and that's where Better Business Community Initiative comes from. It really is just trying to understand and define, how do we do this business better? How do we involve the community in what we're doing? And how do we create action points to move that forward and try and make some real change?
And that's what I love about your initiative, because it's not just words. It really is practical actions. Tell us a little bit, you know, granular level about some of the great things you're doing for the local community in Cornwall, the people who service the houses, and you know, you've got fairly strict rules around that, Emma, and that's practical things that you know, the Better Business Initiative has put into place. So speak to those a little bit, if you would.
So several fronts. So we are Real Living Wage accredited, and you know, I'm part of the steering group that is endeavouring to get Cornwall the first Real Living Wage county accreditation, which is a 3-year project. And again, it's understanding that if you cannot or will not pay people enough to subsist on, you're exploiting them. If you can't look at your other operations, your electricity expenditure, how you dispose of your waste, and make savings in other areas in order to pay people enough to live on, then you're not a viable business ultimately. And again, I understand that hospitality businesses have had an atrocious time post-COVID, and I don't think there's a magic button anyone can press, but understanding that is really, really important to the well-being of our community. And I think the more that people are becoming real living wage accredited, or companies are becoming real living wage accredited in Cornwall, the better our community as a whole will be. And when you factor in as well the rise of 0 hours contracts, and we use 0 hours contracts, we have to, it's a very seasonal operation, but we do have in place a robust 0 hours policy. And crucially, we do employ our housekeepers for our managed properties. There are a lot of people in hospitality whose employees are technically self-employed, and that's because it's cheaper for the business. But for the people involved, and in a large proportion, this affects women, that means that they're not getting their national insurance contributions, they're not getting their pension contributions, they don't have sick pay, they don't have holiday pay. This is, a really, really big issue in Cornwall. And so actually employing people and paying them a real living wage is really, really important. The other things that we do, so for example, we have a sort of tier of how we choose our suppliers in terms of location. So we'll always endeavour to partner with companies that are based in Cornwall first, followed by the UK, followed by Europe. And we endeavour to never get suppliers from further than that. And, not only does that reduce our emissions, but it also enabled us to invest 52% of our supplier spend, less payroll, less utilities, back into our local community last year. And that's really important. It's often one of the criticisms of the holiday industry is that all that money goes up to London, but it is important to have active strategies and policies that retain those tourist pounds in Cornwall as much as we can. And the other thing that we do is we have quite, I guess, a unique welcome gift scheme. So our guests can choose their welcome gift, and they have a choice of 6. But the default gift that they receive from us is a Cornish Food Box gift card. And Cornish Food Box are a wonderful women-led local company that in turn supports a lot of local suppliers and producers. And, we're offering a real service to our guests. They drive 6 hours down from London. They don't have to worry about getting groceries delivered or picking up groceries en route or any of that. They have their groceries that they've already chosen, already in their refrigerator or their kitchen, and that comes from the gift voucher that we provide them with, where they choose their own welcome gifts. So we're also reducing food waste. We also are part of Cornish Food Box's existing delivery route, so we reduce emissions. We're again retaining that money in Cornwall. And for every £40 gift card that we provide, we support on average 15 local suppliers and producers who often, don't benefit from the traditional cream tea or bread and eggs that you get. So people like the guy who just grows organic carrots will really benefit from that. And I think, it's one of those projects that we're most proud of. And, we will continue to do that.
So let's run that through again. Each £40 gift card brings support for 15 local suppliers.
15 local suppliers and producers. Yeah.
And that means that people aren't buying some biscuits from Tesco's that are coming in plastic wrapping and they're probably produced somewhere, in a third country. And it's making the Cornish ecosystem more self-sustainable.
Exactly. I mean, you're looking at so many benefits. There's those food miles that we often heard talk about. If the carrots that you're eating in your luxury holiday cottage in Cornwall were also grown in Cornwall, that's so much better than having been imported from Spain. It's really really important that we take these things into consideration. And and again, we obviously we want to provide the best service for our guests, and it also does that. So that whole idea that you hear spoken of, where sustainability and being a successful business, they exist in silo. And actually, I think when you're looking at being more efficient, when you're looking at reducing emissions, when you're looking at buying local and supporting local and looking after your staff and the community, all of these things play into being a successful business as well. And it just means that you're looking left and right as well as centre, if that makes sense.
Well, I'll let you into a secret, Emma, that I grew up in Cornwall, and the carrots that my dad grew in our garden in Cornwall were the best carrots that I've ever eaten. So I totally concur. And overall, your message here is, well, one of your many messages, but one of your key messages is sustainability can help you save on your utility costs. So it's not just reducing your emissions, you're saving on your utility costs, and take that money that you're saving and pay your staff a bit more and pay your staff more reliably and make sure that they have a income that they can survive on and stay with you and give better service to your customers and all of that sort of beneficial virtuous circle, if you like.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's always about looking at the unseen costs as well. So if you're paying your staff well and you're providing training and quality jobs and all of those things, then you're much, much more likely to retain your staff. And one of the things that's often not talked about is as an estimated, I mean, I've seen various reports, but somewhere between £5,000 and £7,000 to replace a staff member, because you're looking at recruitment costs, you're looking at training, you're looking at possibly losing existing customers because that person's new and doesn't really know what they're doing. They've lost that knowledge, that history. And there's all sorts of indirect implications of that are often not costed for. And possibly had you given the previous person a small pay rise, you might have retained them and their knowledge and their loyalty to the company. And so, and that's a very simplistic way of presenting it, but it just means that when you're strategizing and when you're looking at how you operate a business, it means looking at all of these elements. And when you're only looking at the bottom line, you're actually missing a trick, really. And what we're looking to do is future-proof our business. Profitability isn't a dirty word, but endeavouring to do it responsibly has got to be the way forward, surely.
Well, you're B Corp, so your people, planet, profit.
Yeah.
Which says it all. Let's shift gears a little bit, Emma, and talk a little bit about the environmental side. What are you doing with the houses on the environmental side to improve that aspect as well?
So, obviously, we have owners. So we have about 185 properties, and we do not own those properties. We manage them in varying degrees, and we arrange all the bookings and the guest experience and all of that side of things. Having said that, part of my role is as an educator. So I endeavour to educate all of our stakeholders about why we're doing what we're doing. And part of it is, again, looking at the profit side, there's a growing consumer consciousness and requirement of companies to be clear and transparent about their environmental impacts. So I put together a model, which we call the green grading model. It's not all-encompassing. It's not a solution, but what it does is it pinpoints 48 points that we're looking for in an ethical, sustainable, environmentally conscious property. And those are under 5 headers, which is low carbon, sustainable build, biodiversity and community, reduced waste, and the extra mile. And we then assess our properties. We haven't got through them all yet, but we go through them. And those that score 15 points or more are then in consideration for eco-conscious, which is our collection that is heavily promoted on our website and our social media, and obviously is very clear and transparent to the consumer who's looking for possibly a low carbon holiday. Well, we enable them to do that, and we provide that detail with the same honesty, transparency, and granular level as to how we arrived at that conclusion to our guests, as we do everything else. So how many beds are there? How many bathrooms are there? Is this property run entirely on renewable energy? Does this owner responsibly look after their gardens to support our local nature and environment? Are they water conscious? Things like if you have drought tolerant plants in the garden and a water butt in the garden, you're minimising your impact in those areas. And these are all small things that add up. We also talk a lot to our owners through webinars and newsletters about how they can reduce their impacts, how they can be part of the eco-conscious collection. And then we provide them information like, where to get a water butt from, or the fact that there are now grants available for air source heat pumps, for example. We had a big programme in place to try and get as many of our properties having EV chargers available, which was quite successful. So it's, again, with all of these things, it's incremental and it's not a complete solution. But the key elements are always understanding where we're at with each property and endeavouring to improve that, and being absolutely clear and transparent about what those properties' eco-conscious elements are.
You actually audit all of the houses yourself, don't you? Or yourself or your team audit all of the houses. So this is not just you're taking somebody's information for granted, you're actually going and double checking this yourselves.
Yeah, well, we, as part of our responsibility to the guests and to the owners, we do at least annual quality assessment checks.
Right.
And we've actually embedded the green grading process within that existing process that we have. And so we're not just looking at, the carpets are a bit worn here, they need reviving or whatever. It's also about, hang on a minute, you've got a majority of LED light bulbs in this property, So it's about that. And it's not a complete process, it's an ongoing process. But, the goal is we have an actual goal of increasing the eco-conscious collection by 25% this year. And ultimately, we want to be able to provide that level of information on every property with regards to its environmental impact across the portfolio.
And from the perspective of consumer demand, and there's question marks about how much consumers demand these things, I believe that your eco collection is one of the first to sell. So there's a win-win with the owners. Once they become more sustainable, they're also getting booked first. Is that right?
Yeah. I don't have up-to-date stats on that, I'll be absolutely honest. I do know they're very prominent and they are successful properties in our portfolio. But yes, and I think when you look at the trends for consumer awareness and what consumers are looking for, typically, you always think of, oh, I want, an environmentally friendly holiday, and you're kind of envisaging a yurt in a field, and it's about, it's about communicating that message successfully, that actually you can reduce your impacts and stay in a luxury property. It's difficult because it's not a complete solution, but I think what we want to really do, and this goes with the Welcome Gift project as well, and this eco-conscious collection and the green grading work that goes into creating that, is to make it easy for our guests to do the right thing. And that's not, if you come on holiday and your kids want a belly board on the beach, you might go and buy a £5 polystyrene disposable belly board that's been wrapped in plastic and transported from China, and then discard it because you live in a city centre and you don't need it. However, if you have those belly boards available in the property for you to use, you are much less likely to spend your hard-earned cash on buying more. And it's that idea of making it as easy as possible for our guests to do the right thing.
Embracing the sharing economy.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Those polystyrene boards have been on my radar for quite some years, and it's so easy. It's such an easy thing to avoid. And more beaches as well, you're seeing, like sharing buckets and spades, places that you can borrow them from. And again, I understand that small gift shops are, depend on selling these things, but it's just not sustainable for our planet. And it really isn't. And it's, it's really, really unnecessary.
Yeah. So a couple of more difficult questions, Emma. Firstly, Cornish Gems, obviously 400,000, not taking on a house that's below that in value, great on one hand, but it obviously caters for an upper end of the market. Is sustainability only for the rich, or there's something that can be done? Cornwall doesn't only want to cater for wealthy people, it wants to have a balanced tourism and be a place that's tourism for all. What's being done for the more popular end of the market?
I've got to say, there's a lot of wonderful campsites and lodge sites that do a lot of environmental good work in Cornwall that are more at the affordable end of the market. But even with ourselves, so I had a little look before we came on here. If you're a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 children, you can stay in a Premier Inn for a week in Cornwall for somewhere between £700 and £900, depending which one you go. Our cheapest property for 4 is just under £1,600. But of course, you also can bring your pet. You have a garden, you have a kitchen, so there's, it's not as expensive as you think. And then for people like myself, I'm a single parent with 4 daughters. Hotels were inaccessible to me because they never had rooms that could accommodate the 5 of us, particularly when they were under 16. But we could only stay in holiday homes because we couldn't all fit in a hotel room and they weren't allowed in a room by themselves. So actually, if you're a bigger party, it suddenly becomes more affordable than hotel rooms. Not to say that we're cheap, because it's not cheap. But it's, again, like with everything, it's not as simple as, as you first think. I think Cornwall needs to be inclusive and it needs to welcome everybody. And there is a range of types of properties across the market, and holiday homes absolutely is and should be a part of that. I just question whether, and I believe I'm right in saying last time I looked, it's around 18,000 registered on Airbnb, for example. Not that I just want to pick on them, but they are the biggest booking agent. That kind of number of properties is not sustainable for Cornwall. And yes, we're 185 properties and we're at the higher end of the market, and it's easier for us to put in place these parameters and stick to them. But that doesn't mean that other companies and other organisations can't have their own parameters in place to be more responsible and look after where we are.
But that's exactly what you're doing with the Better Business community. So, you say 185 properties. You've already scaled that through your partnerships with like-minded holiday rental companies to, what, about 500, is it? Around that number?
It's more than that now. I don't have actual figures. But yeah, it will be more than that now.
Okay, so you're somewhere between 500 and 1,000.
Yeah.
The difficulty you have is that's still a small minority compared to Airbnb's 18,000.
Yes, and it is a bit daunting if you think about it that way. But it's not a reason not to do the right thing or try and spread the word about the right thing, because there are various societal elements that cause tipping points. We've seen it with various other environmental policies or laws that have come into place, where it was unthinkable that you wouldn't just get a free plastic bag with your shopping at one point. But you adapt, and I suspect if they did a survey now, the majority of people would support that, retrospectively, obviously. So I think it's always hard when you're starting out on these journeys, and it's never going to be easy, and everybody's not going to agree with us and what we're doing. And actually what we're doing is not possible for everybody, but they can do other things, and they can, it's really right from the beginning, it's always about drawing a line in the sand and improving from that. And wherever you're at as a business or an individual, everyone can do that.
Drawing a line in the sand. Absolutely. And as you say, you do suddenly reach a tipping point. And there's news today that Barcelona have taken that step further than maybe any other city, and are actually, the mayor of Barcelona wants to ban Airbnb from the city. I don't think any city so far has gone so far as that, actually banning Airbnb. So if you don't attend to these things, suddenly a tipping point will be reached, and that's something that you and your community are trying to mitigate against.
Yeah, absolutely, because we believe that we're part of an essential visitor economy, but it has to be done responsibly, and it's possible to do it responsibly. I think actually New York have brought in short-term letting rules whereby you have to be resident in the property if you're short-term letting. It's interesting because there's been actually legislation, I think in Wales and in Scotland now, where you have to register your short-term let with the council. And we were part of the government paper consultation on that for England, and actually we largely support it. There are things that we do as a company, such as your annual risk assessments, fire checks, PAT testing, all of those kind of things that we do, that when you're looking at rentals that are sitting on these international platforms, they're not necessarily doing the due diligence with all these elements. So I think registration makes things safer and better for everybody. So I think there's something in that, and we support that. I hope it will shrink the market a little bit, and obviously that's good for us. But I mean, I hope we will shrink it away from what are very definitely residential properties that are currently sitting as short-term holiday rentals.
And in scaling this, my experience in Cornwall is you are not alone. There are many people in Cornwall who are really endeavouring to make great initiatives in their own way. And actually, part of the issue with Cornwall is there are many great initiatives, but they're not all joined up. And being able to join them up and scale them is really the idea behind the Better Business community, because you're joining like-minded people together, whether they're the other homeowners or whether they're your food box supplier.
Yeah.
All of those people are coming together under one umbrella.
Yeah, we've had all sorts of stakeholders. We've had come to our workshops and meetings. So, the local council, local mayors, representatives from local bids, cleaning companies, all sorts of people have a stake in how this operates and whether it operates successfully for Cornwall, not just for the individual businesses, but for Cornwall. And I think, that's a really, really important part of what we're doing is, we're not just going out there and saying, you have to do this, you have to do that. It's not about preaching. It's about sharing the understanding that, number one, we have to get on board with, climate change risk assessments and understanding what climate change is going to do to our county and our industry. But also we have to be part of the solution. We can't be the entire solution, but we have to be part of it.
Well, that is a marvellous note to conclude on. Emma Fashokun, educator, you said it yourself, you are an educator and you don't take that for granted, because as well as educating others, you're also self-educating. I think you've just been up to London to add to your professional qualifications as well. I think I'm right.
Yes. In my wisdom at my grand age, I'm currently working on my postgrad diploma, which will finish up with an MBA, I hope, next year. So yeah, always learning and hopefully applying it.
So you are an inspiration, and thank you very much for spending the time with us, and thank you very much for really being a champion for sustainable business within tourism within Cornwall.
You're very welcome, and it's absolutely a team effort. There are lots of great companies out there. And if anybody's interested in getting in touch, I'm on LinkedIn. There's some videos on LinkedIn of the workshops, and we'd love to spread the word further.
Thank you, Emma.